Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us for the CO2GeoNet winter webinar. It's lovely to speak with you all today, and I hope that you will enjoy the event that we have planned for you. So I'd like to thank all of our speakers and panelists because we very much appreciate them making the time to share some of the good news around CO2 storage from 2020. So for those of you who are not familiar with us, CO2GeoNet are a network of excellence of research organisations focused on geological storage of CO2. So the event today will summarise some of the good news from 2020, showcase some of the recent progress in Europe in deploying CO2 capture and storage to meet climate targets. So we're going to hear from Maria Velkova from DG Climate on the European Green Deal and CCS strategy in Europe. And this will be followed by perspectives from CCS project operators and developers implementing CCS at large scale, and researchers refining aspects of CCS to make the next generation of projects more efficient. Next slide, please. So we have a packed agenda for you today. So we plan to run through and try to keep to time as best as possible. So we also plan a short break in the middle, which I hope that we can take if we manage to keep to time. So we start off, as I said, with a perspective from Maria Velkova. We then move on to session 1, status of European forerunner projects. And we hear from the Northern Lights projects and the Porthouse projects. Next slide, please. Okay, we then move on to emerging CCUS technologies, so hydrogen from the zero carbon Humber perspective, the spent sector and the Clinker project. And then we have a look at some highlights from the Enabling Onshore Storage project, which was an initiative of the CO2GeoNet network. And we hope to have lots of opportunities for you to ask questions through the question and answer function of Teams. So thank you very much, everybody, for joining us. And I'd like to invite Maria Velkova to give us the first presentation. Thank you, Maria.
Thank you very much, Sari, for inviting me. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm really honored to be the first speaker at CO2GeoNet event. Unfortunately, it can't be live this year, but hopefully I've been there. I've seen some of you, no doubt, in person, and hopefully next year we will be able to continue live discussions. So Sari invited me to give a presentation on what is going on in Europe, how is the European Green Deal advancing, and what does this mean for CCS? What is the CCS strategy for Europe? So I don't know if you could move to my presentation, but in any case, I can continue with my presentation, my speech, my short speech. I hope I managed to do this in the 15 minutes allocated to me. So we are living really unprecedented times. I don't really need to explain this to anybody. And the COVID-19 health crisis really has changed the landscape in Europe globally, and will have important impacts on the economies around the globe. But if you could move to the next slide, please. I like really very much this cartoon, which is on the next slide, because it shows that even with the COVID crisis and possible economic recession, the climate change is actually a much bigger threat, and it has been there for a number of years, and it will remain, unfortunately, to be with us, and we need to continue our actions to fight it. So climate change is there in the background and will not go away. And we in the European Commission, and I believe in all member states governments and governments across the world, are not forgetting that. And the current European Commission has put together what is known as the European Green Deal, which aims actually this is our plan to make the EU economy sustainable. And if you could move to the next slide. which is a snapshot of what we have put together across the different sectoral policies we have in order to deliver the European Green Deal. And there are many different aspects of the European Green Deal, and they all are about sustainability, and they are all about having economic growth which is sustainable. Today I will speak mostly about the climate aspects of it and what we do in the climate action, but just remember that the European Green Deal is not only about climate, it's about the whole economy. I don't know, the slides are, maybe if you could move to the next slide, if possible, which shows the actions which the European Commission has started in the last year, and they are the key actions, at least in the climate action area, are first of all the increased. First of all, is the climate neutrality objective that is being put in a law. So we have had the objective to be the first continent climate neutral in the world, but now the European Commission has proposed in March last year that this climate neutrality objective is put in the law. So we are hoping with this to provide a very strong signal for investments to all businesses that this is the direction of travel. So whenever they're making investments, they have to think, first of all, whether the investments are compatible with the climate neutrality objective of the European Union or of Europe, because that of course concerns all countries in Europe, especially like Norway, for example, and Iceland are sharing the EU objectives entirely. So this is the first and foremost objective, the climate neutrality, but that is still far away. That is still in the 2050, and we cannot just advance slowly towards this objective. And this is what we have realized, that with the 2030 framework, which was initially put together, we are not going to reduce emissions fast enough. And we are going to create certain dangers of locking in solutions which are not compatible with the climate neutrality on one hand, and on the other hand, we are going to make it more and more difficult to reach climate neutrality after 2030. So the previous 2030 objective for emission reduction, which was 40% reduction of 40% of greenhouse gas emission avoidance, is feasible. It remains feasible, and we have actually changed all our legislation, climate legislation, in the recent years to match this objective. But the new Commission is very ambitious and came with this proposal to increase the ambition and to have an ambition which is to reduce emissions by 55% in 2030. This is very challenging for us. It's very challenging for the economy. It will have impacts, social impacts, but it is manageable. And this is what we show in our analysis. There's some problem with the changing of the slides. I should be on a much further slide, and unfortunately I have some graphs there which exemplify what I'm saying, but in any case I try to be as clear as possible.
I apologize, Maria. We're going to try the slides not in presentation mode, because I think sometimes this helps.
Okay.
Julia, can you try this for me? Sorry, Julia has the dashboard at the moment.
Yeah. So yeah, if we manage to move through the slides, I can. Yeah. So just very briefly, this is what I was explaining about the European Green Deal. I I don't have the time to go in details in all that, and in fact that is not even all that is the European Green Deal, but you will receive the presentations, and of course all the information is on the internet, but just to show how much work is going on, that is a snapshot of what happened in 2020, and there's a lot more coming in 2021. And so if you could move to the next slide, it seems now the presentation is working fine. Maybe not. Maybe not. Ah, yes. Okay, perfect. So that is, in fact, a graph which shows that we are quite on track in reaching the 2020 objective. As I explained, the 2030 objective, the previous objective, is also achievable. It is also achievable to go to minus 55%. It's challenging, but if we want to go to climate neutrality, we'd better start accelerating the investments now than having to do way more investments later on, which will be much more catastrophic for the climate on one hand, and it will be more difficult for the economy. What this graph shows also is that Europe has been very successful in reducing emissions without actually reducing the GDP. So the European GDP has continued to grow. There's a little bit of a dip around 2020, and I believe that is the impact of the COVID we are expecting. But that is a small impact, which and our projections are that GDP will continue growing while the next GHG emissions will have to reduce to zero, or can reduce to zero. So this is what we're trying to, we have done our analysis, and our analysis shows that this is possible. And what we're doing now is we are putting in place all the necessary legislation that will allow us to reach minus 55% in 2030. So if you could go to the next slide, please. I already said that the EU climate neutrality objective is proposed to be a law, so that is the EU climate law that was adopted last year. The proposal by the Commission. Then that was in March. In September, we published also the climate target plan. This is actually explaining how we propose to reach the 55% greenhouse gas emission objective. And what is going on at the moment is that all sectoral legislation is going to be updated. So my colleagues in DG Climate Action and DG Energy are working now to update the EU ETS directive, the effort sharing decision, the LULUCF, the Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency directives, the CO2 vehicle efficiency standards. Colleagues in DG TaxUT are working on a carbon border adjustment mechanism. So all legislation needs to be adapted to the increased ambition. At the same time, Europe is putting in place a lot of money. This is what is known as the Next Generation EU, and at the same time, the member states are revising their national energy and climate plans and working on recovery and resilience plans, which would allow them to use the grants and loans available under Next Generation EU, with the main objective of these plans that they are compatible with the EU climate neutrality objective. So, if you go to the next slide, please. I have two slides which actually explain these taken conclusions from our analysis of how it is possible to reach the 55% objective. And what our analysis shows, I already said that it is possible. Of course, extra investments will be needed, but it's not, they are not in an impossible order of magnitude. I don't have the slide on the investments because I needed to shorten my presentation. But what I wanted to show you is that where the priorities are. The priority is clearly the energy system, because 75% of EU greenhouse gas emissions are still due to energy use, energy production and energy use. So the main objective here is to increase the renewable electricity production, and not only electricity production, but heating and cooling. And in fact, as you see, by 2030, the aim would be to double the renewable electricity production to 65%, and to increase the heating and cooling share to 40%, which is really quite of an increase of ambition. So if you could move to the next slide, these are really only extracts of the really big in-depth analysis which we have done. We identify also clean hydrogen as a very important energy carrier for the future. Industry could decrease emissions by 25% by 2030 compared to 2015, and probably that is a less ambitious objective as compared to what is happening in the energy sector. But this is taking into account how slow investments can happen in industry. At the same time, we are also acknowledging that zero and low carbon technologies will need to be kick-started and tested at scale this decade. And here is actually where CCS comes into play, because CCS is one of the low carbon technologies which we have at our disposal. So it is, what I want to say here is that if you read all these recent documents of the Commission, quite often you don't see CCS very prominently mentioned in the documents. You see a lot about renewables, a lot still about energy efficiency, a lot about bioenergy or LULUCF, a lot about hydrogen, but not so much about CCS. And this is not because CCS is not important, but because we really need to focus our work in those areas which I just mentioned, while CCS still needs to be tested at scale. I mean, I have been saying this for quite some time, and I'm sure you perhaps have heard this need to test the scale of CCS for too long. But the reality is such that we still have only 2 CCS facilities in Europe, and these are in Norway. So this continues to be a very important objective for us. So if you could move to the next slide. I just want to show you that we understand the importance of CCS, and what this slide is showing is the role of CO2 captured and stored for reaching the climate neutrality objective in 2050. And the circle is around the scenarios which actually reach climate neutrality. All the other scenarios which we have looked at, that is back in 2018, don't bring us to climate neutrality. So for all those scenarios where we reach climate neutrality, CCS, or CO2 capture, utilization and storage, here we talk also about utilization, has a substantial role. And this role we like to underline is linked very much to use of CCS in industry for those processes which cannot reduce emissions otherwise. We want to underline the use or the combination of CCS with biomass or even direct air capture later on, because we would need to have negative emissions, because some sectors like transport or agriculture cannot reduce emissions to zero. So that's why we will need to compensate. Therefore, CCS is really very important. So if you move to next slide, please. Which explains the previous one, yes. This recaptures what we are doing for CCS in Europe, or CCUS, which most probably you're quite aware. And I already explained that, well, the majority of our work at the moment is focused on the increased ambition and on the giving a long-term perspective. And how is this going to play a role for CCS? Even if we don't mention CCS very, very much, we have to update the EU ETS, and the EU ETS is going to play a crucial role because for the moment this remains our main incentive for projects to capture CO2 and store this CO2 permanently. But as you well know, no doubt, is that the EU ETS price is not as high as needed, so CCS projects can have a business case. But the increased ambition and the update of the EU ETS no doubt is going to lead to a very strong carbon signal. This is one important message I want to say. The other aspect which is under development is perhaps something that is not so well known. We have started the work on an EU certification system based on GHG performance for low carbon basic materials and for carbon removals. And this certification system hopefully will be able to cover technologies which are currently not incentivized by our legislation. So this will be in part important for some CCU technologies where they can bind the CO2 or the carbon for longer periods of time, but it will be also important for biomass combined with CCS, because for the moment the incentive in the EU ETS is not there for using of biomass. And of course, we continue our funding of CCUS through Horizon Europe, Innovation Fund and Connecting Europe facility. And in the next slides, I want to, if you can move to the next slide, I want to touch upon a little bit on what I most know, actually, because I'm really working very much in the last 2 years now on the Innovation Fund. This is the EU, really the most important instrument for supporting demonstrations and large first of a kind commercial scale facilities in power and industry sectors. And we have started it last year with the first call for proposals, and we are planning to run annual calls. So we have 2 types of calls, large scale project calls and small scale project calls. At the moment, we are evaluating already the proposals which we have received from the first large-scale call. And actually, if you could move to the next slide, I won't go in all the details of this slide, but what is important here to say is that we will be able to fund up to 60% of the additional costs related to any innovative technology which is eligible. This means that there will be still 40% of gap of funding for this project. And this is why we are working very much with the member states to encourage them to support the technologies where they see a priority. And we see that this is happening in quite a number of member states in relation to various low carbon technologies, including CCS. What is important here to say also is that the Innovation Fund is actually financed through the EU Emission Trading Scheme. So we have an estimate that the fund will have about 10 billion euro available up until 2030, but that is at the price of 20 euro, the CO2, the EUA, the allowance of the carbon allowance, which means that if the carbon price increases, we will have much more money on one hand, and on the other hand, projects will actually have a smaller financial gap. This is on one hand. On the other hand, in the review of the EU ETS, which is going on at the moment, there are also ideas, but nothing is certain for sure yet, but there are ideas to actually increase the volume of the Innovation Fund. So they are quite positive news related to the Innovation Fund. We have to be able also to absorb this money. And if you go to the next slide, I will just show you a few slides, and then it will be the end of my presentation. I wanted to explain how big interest we have in the Innovation Fund. So we have received for the first call 311 proposals, which are requesting more than 21 billion euro. So that is really huge oversubscription, but there is a good explanation because we haven't had a similar program since actually 2012, when we had actually the second and last call for the NER 300 program. Some of you may remember this program. So it's not surprising, we have an incredible amount of proposals which we are at the moment evaluating. And if you go to the next slide, I'm showing on this next slide, if we can move, the next slide shows actually that these proposals which we have received, they come from all member states and from all eligible sectors, which, yes, exactly, that is the slide. And which was very good for us, because we were a bit doubting, maybe some small member states will not submit proposals, but no, we have proposals from all member states and all sectors that are eligible are covered. And here on this slide, actually, you can see that in the energy intensive industry part, combined with CCS, if you count all the proposals there, 69% of the proposals have either hydrogen or CCUS components. So there's really a lot of proposals concerning these two major technological pathways. So if you could move to the next slide, I have one almost final slide, which I'm sure is of interest to this audience, is the proposals which we have received that have a component of carbon capture, utilization or storage. So in fact, about 1/5 or 21% of the proposals we have received, of these 311 proposals, have such a component. What is interesting to see, and this is preliminary analysis because we haven't been able to read yet through the full detail of the proposals. So this preliminary analysis shows that only 7% of the total proposals are full chain CCUS proposals, which is not surprising because we have encouraged part chain projects. And what is also interesting is that 7% also of proposals received have a potential for net carbon removal. So this is, as mentioned earlier, this is an objective which we are pursuing very much, and we are very happy to see that there are a number of such proposals. So on my last slide, if you could move to it, I just, in case you're more interested in the Innovation Fund running of calls, at the moment the small scale call is open until 10th of March, most probably not of interest for big CCS projects or even CO2 storage projects, because there is a limit of capital cost there of 7.5 million euro. The large-scale call, on the other hand, we will complete the evaluations by the end of 2021. And what we are planning, and it's not on this slide, is to publish the next large-scale call in September this year. So this is all I wanted to say. I'm sorry that I went a little bit over time. I am happy to answer any questions if I can.
Thank you very much, Maria, and I really apologise for the technical issues. And I see some of the presenters are also struggling a little to join, so I hope that we can resolve the technical issues as we go along. This is the joy of online meetings. So I think you can see there is one question coming up in the chat from talking about how we ensure how do we tackle if we have opposition to cross-border adjustment mechanisms for carbon? I think this is quite a challenging question, and I would welcome any responses from any of our speakers today. I think it becomes quite an important issue as we start to move carbon around. How do we avoid moving carbon to other countries? So if we tax it in one country, it just moves us out of our grasp into another place. So I think this is quite an important question to answer.
Well, I think actually precisely the aim of a possible carbon border adjustment tax is not to move carbon, actually to stop moving so much carbon across the borders. Whether we will be successful with this is a big question, because I'm sure all of you are aware of the possible challenges of such adjustment mechanism, but we want to protect our industry that is investing in low carbon technologies. So if other countries are not taking the same level of measures, it only makes sense that we have such a carbon border adjustment tax. And if anything, we have delayed this tax for too long. So my hopes are actually that we are able to have this tax in place. But we have to wait, because this is all under preparation and it will take some time indeed.
Thank you very much, Maria. So we have a couple of other questions coming in on the response to the innovation funds. So are you pleased with the response? It sounded very positive so far. And then I see some people are asking about how many 311 proposals for 2.17 billion euros.
Yes, we are pleased and also a bit worried, because obviously there will be a lot of proposals which will be disappointed. But what we see already in the evaluations is that a lot of proposals are not there to start immediately after we give them the grant. They still have a couple of 3 or 4 more years to get ready. So what is clear is that for second stage, we're going to select 70 proposals, and out of this, we will fund as many as we can with the 1 billion we have for the first call. So there will be a lot of disappointed projects, but on the other hand, as I said, and that's why I said it in September, already we are going to publish the next call. This next call may be even bigger. It's still under discussion, because we are actually acknowledging the very big interest of projects there, and we will continue with annual calls. So for those applicants which are not successful, my message is definitely don't give up. You're not successful, most probably not because you're not innovative, not because you don't have potential to reduce emissions, but most probably you're not entirely mature. So use the time until next calls to prepare and to present really mature proposals. And we will be there for 10 years. And as I said, with an increasing funds, and hopefully we will be able to fund all good projects.
Thank you very much, Maria. That was a very excellent presentation, and thank you to the audience for the questions. So I think we will now move on to our next. So Julia, if you could load the slides for Dr. Sandberg from Equinor, who will give us his perspective from the Northern Lights project on building the CCS business. Thank you. Over to you, Dr. Sandberg.
So thanks a lot, Siri, and thank you for inviting me to give you an update on the status and the future of Northern Lights. And you will clearly hear at the end that the Innovation Fund is very important for our future success of this network. So Northern Lights is a collaboration project between Equinor, Shell and Total. We have sort of 1/3 each, and we're doing CO2 transport and storage, not capture. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Okay, so the very good news is that this project is now being realized. We are actually building the project right now, because just before Christmas, the Norwegian government made its investment decision to support what they called the Longship project. And the Longship project is one capture plant in a cement factory in Norway, which is owned by the Heidelberg Group. They're also partly funding a waste incinerator in Oslo, which is part owned by Fortum and Oslo City. And they're funding the first part of the Northern Lights CO2 transport and storage. So there will be a full value chain established in Norway. And here you see our Minister of Oil and Energy and the 3 CEOs of the 3 companies. Next slide, please. And the government is coming in with substantial money. It is about 1.5 billion euro, and they're funding about 80% of the full costs, the capex and 10 year of opex for what I described. So it is a very, very thorough Norwegian government support for this project. So what is then the Longship and the Northern Lights? As I said, if you look at the left, you see there are capture plants, there are ship-based CO2 transport, there is intermediate storage, and there is permanent storage in the North Sea. And on the right, you see the locations of the 2 capture plants. One is still looking for additional funding, you know, the waste incinerator, for example, from the Innovation Fund, but the other one is fully funded. The ship goes about 500 kilometers to Bergen area, where we have intermediate storage. But maybe the most important in this illustration is the dashed line, where we call third parties, because we are building the CO2 storage site with overcapacity so that we can source and receive CO2 from European industry. Next slide, please. And that has been incredible interest over the last 2-3 years. This is the same concept within some more detail. This figure has 2 parts. The upper part is the same value chain. It is a complex value chain because it is ship-based, where you need intermediate storage 2 places, both with the CO2 emitter and at our side. And at the bottom, you see something else. That is the volumes. Okay, so the first phase will be built to be able to handle 1.5 million tons of CO2 per year. The 2 Norwegian sites will fill up about half of that. But we're installing a pipeline with larger capacity already from the very beginning. So that has a capacity of 5 million tons per year, which will go from our intermediate site and out in the North Sea to the permanent storage location. So we're having substantial room for additional CO2, and that is the business development we're doing. Next slide, please. With the Northern Lights CO2 transport and storage, there is actually no new technology. All the technological elements already exist and are well proven and well known. But what we're doing is really we're innovating the business model. We're making CCS available as a service. And that is also the new thing with, I would say, all the CO2 CCS projects that are now being developed in Europe. You know, on the left, you have the traditional model, 1 capture site, 1 storage site, and 1 single pipeline. On the right is the networked model. We have maybe the most extreme version of a network because we're ship-based, but also the other projects like Porthouse you will hear about are also the hub and cluster project, which is the modern way of doing CCS projects. Next, please. And by having this flexibility, suddenly all industrial sites in Northern Europe, which are close to a port and which are within reasonable sailing distance, they can get started with CO2 capture. So we have identified about 350 industrial sites that are of relevance for Northern Lights. So you can say this is our potential market. They are from very many different industries. You see the list. They are in many different countries. And out of these 350 industries, we are now already in dialogue with 50 of them about discussing how they potentially could link up with the Northern Lights. They do the capture, we do the transport and storage. Next slide, please. And we see that Northern Lights, Porthouse, the UK projects, the Irish projects, you know, the Danish green sand, we are just the beginning, you know. This is the beginning of what has to become a European network for CO2 removal, you know. We will need, in order to reach the CO2 targets of Europe, which Maria described, we will need to have an ecosystem for CO2 removal, which is similar to the ecosystems for gas or electricity that we have today. Northern Lights, we are the first. We have taken our investment decision. Hopefully Porthouse and the others follow soon, and then we can start to expand on the network. Next, please. In order to move from potential customers to real customers with signed contracts, where where we have the industrial solutions, it's a stepwise approach. For us, it is very important with MOUs. These we signed with 7 companies from 6 countries and 6 industries in September 2019. Next, please. And here you see our CEO with the CEOs of these 7 companies. We were also very happy in October 2020 to sign a spectacular MOU with Microsoft Corporation from US, who has some very strong climate ambitions, not only to be climate neutral, but also to remove their historical emissions. Thereby, they need more than renewable electricity. Next, please. And this is my last slide, and it shows sort of where we are in the business development. If you're looking at the left, and it's really a stepwise, because we are developing a market that doesn't exist. There is no market for CCS today. We all believe that there will be a market, and we all know that we need a market, but we actually have to build the market as we build projects and the business. So we're starting with our 350 potential emitters. We are in dialogue with 50 of them. We have signed NDAs with 25. We have written letters of support or MOUs with 14 and 9. And I'm also very happy to say that of all the applicants to Maria's Innovation Fund, 11 capture projects has applied for that fund, pointing to Northern Lights as the place where they want to store. These projects are ready to be built if they get funding. And if you see at the right, we have also submitted now heads of terms to 12 companies where we're starting to discuss the real nitty-gritty of the commercial agreements. Next slide, please, which is my sort of farewell slide. There's a lot of learnings from the whole development of Longship and Northern Lights, and here is a link to where you can find lessons learned and a lot of other things. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this, Dr. Sandberg. I had hoped that we might be able to invite Peter Ahrens to follow directly on from you, but we are still having a few connection issues, I believe, unless you've managed to join us in the last moment, Peter. Okay, I guess we are still having a few connection issues. So I wonder if I could direct you to the Q&A part of this. There's a few comments about the regulatory framework and are we ready to receive a CCS project? So could you comment on the regulations and whether we are ready? I think Norway has a good answer to this, but perhaps some of the other countries find this a little bit more difficult. Could you comment?
Yes, very happy. So yes, we are ready. We're ready to do CCS in Europe, okay? And we are ready to move CO2 across borders. They used to, for the Northern Lights concept, which is cross border, we used to have an enormous hurdle or really a roadblock, which was the London Protocol. That was fixed in October 2019, where all the parties of the IMO agreed to change that regulation. So it's no longer forbidden to transport CO2 across borders. All it now requires is that the 2 countries need to agree bilaterally, but we will think that will happen. So there's actually no real roadblock towards CCS, but there's a lot of regulation that still needs to be fixed and improved to make this smoother and cheaper. And I think what we identified is there's quite a lot of European legislation which is shaped around the old model of CCS, where you had one capture site, one storage, and one single pipeline. So they are not really designed for the network model, or a lot of regulation is not really designed for CCS at all. But it's more about improving and perfecting legislation than real roadblocks.
Thank you very much. So at the moment, we don't have our we don't have our next scheduled speaker. So I think we will move on to Anna Karolko, and we'll sort of swap the presentations around a bit, which is not what we wanted to do, but we'll try this now. So Anna, could I ask you to step in before the break, and we will try to resolve the technical issues behind the scenes.
Sure.
Thank you. The floor is yours.
Thank you. So today I will be talking about the project that we believe will be a game-changing project in both UK and actually as well in the wider context of the global climate ambition, because of the knowledge transfer and skills gained during this project that could be applied anywhere. Next slide, please. So UK has a climate ambition of becoming net zero by 2050, and a big element of that is decarbonizing its critical industrial clusters like Humber, Teesside, and so on. The Humber is the largest industrial cluster in UK, both in terms of CO2 emissions and energy consumption, and the amount and diversity of the industry players in the region, and also its geology. So it's a very unique prospect for UK. What CCC, the Committee on Climate Change in UK, called the super place. The fundamental principle behind the Zero Carbon Humber project is developing and anchoring low carbon infrastructure, so that all these industry players could actually decarbonize and have an option of either fuel switch or do a post-combustion capture of their CO2 emissions, moving them first on shore and then offshore to a permanent CO2 storage in the southern North Sea, which would be handled by Northern Endurance Partnership. I will be talking about this later. But first, I would like to focus more on this hydrogen to Saltend project on the northern bank of Humber River. If you click on the slide, please. Yes. This project is really about anchoring this low carbon infrastructure, providing first volumes of CO2 to justify the pipelines. The project is about the decarbonization of one of the oldest chemical parks in UK, Saltend Chemical Park. The ambition is to produce blue hydrogen on site in order to do first blending and then 100% running the gas turbines in the Triton CHP, which is providing power and steam for this chemical park. So by that, we would decarbonize the products of this chemical park, but also we would produce ammonia on site, clean ammonia that would provide clean ammonia for such sectors as maritime sector, chemicals, and so on. So this project would be a low regret catalyst for anchoring such a low carbon infrastructure. And the CO2 pipeline is planned to be dimensioned in the same way as the Northern Lights project, to be a little bit over-dimensioned than this first anchor project. It is planned to be 24 inches and have a capacity of around 17 million tons of CO2 per annum. These volumes are based on the known projects in the region and on the realistic volumes that we could expect So this is a volume that Equinor is gathering as an integrator in the project. Of course, we would need offshore CO2 transport and storage system. And that's the next slide, please. So we plan a joint infrastructure that would serve two clusters, Humber and T-site, showing how these two clusters can collaborate together. And the next slide, please. This will be operated by Northern Endurance Partnership, which is a partnership of BP, Shell, Eni, Total, ourselves, and National Grid Ventures, and operated by BP. What is good about Endurance is that it is a vast geological storage, which has very well understood geology and clear plans for expansions as the CCS requirements would increase. I think it's my last slide, and so this project is really in the same way as Northern Lights project that Per has described earlier. Is not a traditional project with a traditional planning. Of course, we would need planning, but we would need also a lot of public support, and this is what we have seen applying for the bid. And Zero Carbon Humber project for now is a bid for funding to develop that infrastructure. So apart from the core consortium of 11 partners, which is represented by 9 industries and National Grid Ventures and ourselves, we have received letters of support from over 50 companies in the region that recognize the benefits for climate change and economic benefits from the project in context of job creation. So this is really what this type of collaborative effort is what is needed to take this first of a kind of projects off the ground. And let's summarize Humber project, and thank you.
Thank you very much, Anna, for your presentation. It's, for me, having been working on CCS for almost 20 years now as a researcher, it's wonderful to see so many big new projects online or coming online. So I'm going to go to a few of the questions and answers for both you and for Per as well. So we have some questions on Northern Lights. Is it possible to quantify the potential of how many tons of CO2 could be removed per year through Northern Lights after everything is developed?
Yeah, so for the moment we have phase 1 and phase 2 outlined. So phase 1 is 1.5 million tons per year, and we're scheduling 20 years at least. And then phase 2 would be 5 million tons. We don't have a phase 3 outlined yet. You know that, but it would have to be a scale up to make sense. We have only taken investment decision for phase 1, but we're working on the phase 2 investment decision. And you know, some enthusiasts like myself hope that the phase 2 decision will be taken very soon. You know, but that's a tough investment decision because it's a chicken and egg always. You know, do you have the customer first or do you develop the storage first? And I think what we've learned is you have to do both, chicken and egg.
Thank you very much for this. So I see a couple of other questions. Do we have a good estimate for the cost of CO2 for these upcoming projects for Northern Lights or for the Humber project? the cost for storage, for transport and storage for handling the CO2?
You can go first, Anna. You have the small cost.
I have the cost from my H21 project that I can communicate, and this is around 10 pounds per ton, which is really low, but this is because of the economies of scale.
So that is, of course, a cost I envy, Anna. But that's really sort of when we have reached the scale up, you know, when we're able to have large collection of CO2 and we have a pipeline directly to the reservoir, then you have these nice costs. Northern Lights is more for the startup phase, to build the volume, to build the market, and because we have a ship-based solution, it is more costly. But what we have said publicly is that our ambition is by 2030 to offer this transport and storage for a cost between 30 and 55 euro per ton. And then you would add the capture cost to have the full value chain cost.
Thank you very much for this. It's really good to see the prices are coming down and that a transport and storage business is becoming ever more economic. So I have another question which kind of feeds into that. Why is it better to store all the CO2 in one place rather than in multiple storage sites?
It is not better. It's better to store a lot of CO2 in many places. But you have to start somewhere, you know. So I think and I think, you know, when we hear the Porthouse project description, you will hear a story about another storage location. And we just need to get to many storage locations rapidly in Europe.
I agree with Per, and I can add that there are several studies that we are looking into the future towards 2050 that show enormous CO2 injection rate by 2050 that would be needed to decarbonize Europe, and that would mean that we would need to inject everywhere.
This is true. These are just the first flagship projects, and we're going to need a lot more to meet our targets and meet the EU target for carbon neutrality. So I have another practical question for the Northern Lights project. So how long was the exploration phase for Northern Lights, and did you include new geology and geophysics research, or did you adopt geology and geophysics from the oil industry?
So it is a combination. We're using, of course, existing seismic, existing knowledge about the subsurface. We've done some unique exploration, unique drilling. It's quite a tedious, you know. We know that there is enormous amount of storage potential in the North Sea. And what we have found and seen in the Northern Lights is that to qualify a specific storage site requires a lot of work. And one thing is sort of the subsurface work as such. Another is to get the decision through sophisticated decision-making systems like in Shell, Total and Equinor, and with the government. So it's quite a lot of work, which should not be underestimated, and it takes time to then sort of feel secure. Yes, we have the storage site which we want. In our case, we're using an aquifer, so it's not a depleted gas field, but it's a sort of an area where there is no oil and gas, but it's not very, very nice reservoir characteristics.
Thank you very much for this answer. It's always the case. How long has the storage appraisal phase been? Could you please remind me? I think it's been a few years, maybe.
It is more, you know. I think that the project as such was initiated. The whole value chain project was initiated by the government 5-6 years ago, and they took the initiative, but they also said, you know, we cannot do this. Industry has to do it, and as if we're going to develop these as industrial projects, we need to use the methodology of industry, which is sort of feasibility study, concept study, feed study. So we have more. We have with more and more precision. Basically looked at the subsurface for the last 5-6 years. We even changed our storage site about 2.5 years ago. We had another storage site first, which was called Smeaheia, and then we moved it further out 2.5 years ago.
I hear a lot of projects telling me that a good plan B is essential.
Yeah.
So I have one more question for both of you, and then we'll go to a short break. So we have a question regarding business models of they do the capture, we do the transport and storage. Who reduces the emissions in their internal CO2 balances? So who gets the carbon credits?
So that would be the emission industry. You know, the cement factory, the ammonia plant, the waste incinerator, steel factory, or we also have BECCS. You know, we have quite a large interest in biological CCS. Okay, as I would think that of our 50 potential customers, more than 10 of them have negative emissions. Okay, we have direct air capture companies already. We're in dialogue with almost all of them, and they would get the credits. In the future, one could of course also look into sort of different business models where we, as part of our payment, get part of the credits, or they get the credits or something. But in the beginning, it's clearly the emitter that gets the credit and wants to use the credit.
Thank you very much. So I think we will take a very short break. Thank you very much, Anna and Per, for these excellent presentations and the really exciting projects that you presented. So we will take a short break and we will come back around 3:10 European time. So thank you very much, and we will be back shortly.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Peter Arends. I am working within the Porthouse project as a project manager and integration manager, and I'm very, very glad to present the current status of the Porthouse project to you. I have a short presentation which we will follow to tell you and show you where we are. First of all, I'd like to show you what the climate objectives of the Netherlands are. As a reference, we have the 220 megatons in 1990 and our objective to be on 11 megatons in 2050. But first we focus on 2030, and in 2030 we want to minimize our carbon emissions with 49%, which means that we have to reduce approximately 100 megatons. And from these 100 megatons, as you can see as the next sheet, 20 megatons has to be delivered by optimizations and reduction in the industry. So 14.3 and 6 megatons of CO2 reduction are asked for industry to provide on this. And in the Netherlands, we have chosen, I'm going a little bit too fast now, from this 20 megatons, 7 megatons is proposed to be delivered by carbon capture and storage. So our objective in the Netherlands is that we will reach before 2030 7 megatons at carbon dioxide reduction from industry caused by carbon storage. Well, then I have a compare with other CO2 emission reductions, and as you can see, CCS in this compare is actually the most the less expensive way to do this. So what we require for a subsidy per avoided ton of CO2 is under 100 euros per ton, where other solutions have a much higher request on subsidy. So I'd like to focus a little bit more on Porthouse now. How does CUS work? The U stands for utilization, which could be reached if CO2 is also delivered, as you can see at the right of this sheet, to the greenhouses or other industries. But the most of the carbon will be captured and stored in a depleted gas field, as shown on this picture. And this is a very much simplified situation of the Rotterdam plant. There's a lot of industry. We want to collect the CO2 from the industries who capture the CO2 themselves. They will transport it, or we will transport it by compression to an existing platform. And there we will inject the CO2 in this empty gas field, as we call the storage location. And this is all going to happen in the Rotterdam area. And why is it in the Rotterdam area? It's because we have 16% of the national CO2 emissions from industry comes from the Rotterdam harbor and the industry that is located there. And the positive thing is that the industry is built very close to each other, so we do not have to build huge amounts of pipelines, and therefore it can be realized rather cost effective. And another very positive point is that the storage location, as you saw on the former sheet, is only 20 kilometers away. So we have a very easy access to this existing storage location and the existing platform. And of course, but that's actually more for the future. We see a lot of possibilities where we plant with future initiatives as hydrogen. Okay, I want to go to the next sheet then. Meanwhile, I want to switch off my camera because. Okay, so as seen, the Rotterdam area is an interesting point to do CCUS, and therefore we have planned this installation and configuration with an onshore pipeline through which we connect to industries and then collect from the industries the CO2 that we require. We built near the coast a compressor station where we compress the CO2 from the clients into the offshore pipeline for transportation to the platform. So I have two sheets now that will explain in more detail how the project is being built up. So the CO2 capture will be done by the customers themselves. We will collect the CO2 in our onshore pipeline of 42-inch, so it's a really big pipeline. The compressor station will compress and then send it out to the empty gas field on the North Sea. Therefore, we can collect 37 megatons of CO2 during the complete life cycle of the plant. And we have planned to do 2.5 megatons of CO2 transport and storage a year. At this sheet also is stated that Porthouse is a state-owned company. 3 state-owned mothers together form the shareholder of Porthouse, which is EBN, Gasunie, and the Port of Rotterdam. And we have already closed contacts and contracts with Air Liquide Air Products, ExxonMobil, and Shell being the first 4 customers for CCUS in the Netherlands. The complete project requires a capex investment for about 450 to 500 million euros, and we have planned to be operational in 2024, which we started with the first initiatives and feasibility studies in 2017. So now let's get a little bit more detailed view at the different parts of Porthouse. As said, we will build a 30 kilometers long pipeline through the harbor area in which we collect the CO2 that is captured by our clients. The diameter of this pipeline will be 108 centimeter or 42 inch, and it will have a length of 30 kilometers. Then the compressor station near the shore will consist of 3 electrical driven compressors, each having a different capacity, so we can cover a wide range of CO2 flow. And it will be cooled by seawater. And the seawater that we use to cool our compressors will then afterwards be reused in the nearby LNG installation, through which we will let the cooling water flow back into the sea at the same temperature as we cut it out. So then the offshore pipeline from the compressor station to the platform is built up from a 40 centimeter or 16 inch temperature insulated pipeline. Here the CO2 will be compressed to 130 bar maximum, where in the onshore pipeline the pressure will be maximized at 35 bar to prevent liquid forming. And the offshore pipeline has a length of 22 kilometers and will be connected to the riser at the platform of P18. So this is the platform that we will use. It's the existing Amoco P18, which is currently being operated by TAQA. The cast field in which this P18 platform is being built is at a depth of around 3,000 meters. And as said, the capacity is 37 megatons. Then in 16 years, when we have injected the 37 megatons, we will close all wells and we will take the platform away from its current location. But as said, that is planned for in 2040, after we have operated for 16 years. So then a short overview about owners, clients and public authorities. As said, the Porthouse project is initiative of 3 state-owned companies, Port of Rotterdam, ABN and GasUnie. Our clients are private companies, as said, as Air Liquide, Air Products, ExxonMobil and Shell. But we have, of course, to do with public authorities as well. And we received from the European funding we received a funding from the CEF of an amount of 102 million euros to subsidize this project. Okay, then a short overview of the status and the planning. As said, we started this project in feasibility in 2017. In 2020, and that is last year and this year, we are running our FEED procedures and we are tendering in the market to find ourselves contractors, engineering contractors, to join us for the execution phase. Then in 2022, planned in the first half of 2022, we will take final investment decision. And of course, we have to synchronize that with the final investment decisions of our customers, who of course have to build or to adjust their carbon capture installations and compressor installations to feed into our pipeline. So this is a very important moment. When FID is taken, the project can really go on. Afterwards, we will have the construction of the system in the years 2022 and 2023. And that will all lead to an operational system and commissioning phase in 2024. Okay, that in a nutshell is what we are doing with Porthouse. That is the status where we are. And there are a lot of challenges. There were a lot of challenges, and there will be a lot of challenges. We already know that. But on the other hand, we know that we do the right thing by building and developing a system like this. And we are very proud to be the first one injecting CO2 into depleted gas fields with its own process requirements and its process challenges. So for so far, this is my presentation. I really like to thank you all for your attention. And if any questions might appear, please contact me because I'm very much willing to answer these if wanted. Thank you very much and goodbye.
I will hand over to Fulvio, who is going to talk us through another emerging CCUS technology. And this is very important for Europe in terms of looking at storage from cement plants. So in the early days, CCS was very much focused on power, and we now start to see some emerging exciting technology projects coming through with cement. So Fulvio, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Yes, good afternoon. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Fulvio Canonico. I'm the R&D manager of Buzzi Unicem. I will, sorry, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
We hear you now, Fulvio.
Okay, thanks. I will give you an overview about this project that we are running. This is Horizon 2020 project funded by European Commission dealing with CO2 capture in cement plant. So this is just an overview of our company. This is Buzzi Unicem, is an international cement company. So we are producing cement in different parts of the world. And of course, we will deal with CO2 issue in different countries and with different rules. And so this will be also an important issue for the development of this CO2 capture technology. So please go to the next slide. So I think it's important to know also what are the approach that cement sector have in terms of CO2 reduction, because we are working on this topic since many years, and of course some of these issues are already reach a very high TRL level. So, for example, the increased use of alternative fuel. We have now plants which are operating with more than 90% of alternative fuel, and so they are not using any more petcoke. We are strongly working on the reduction of the clinker content in cement, and last year we were able to get authorized cement with less than 50% of content of clinker. So by replacing the clinker with other material that can be well-known material like slag or fly ash, but also innovative supplementary cementitious material like calcine clay or combination of slag and limestone. We are also working on, let's say, eco-design, so proposing high-strength cement, very high-strength cement that could resize the structure, so lower the size of the structure using less volume of the concrete, even with a higher dosage of cement per cubic meter. But of course, at the end, we will be able to save quite a lot of cement and clinker. And of course, very important topic for us is the carbon capture and storage. Next slide, please. So you will see in this slide a concept that has been presented by VDZ, where several solutions for decarbonize our industry are proposed. So of course we have solution approach at level of the clinker, of the cement, or of a better use, a more efficient use of the concrete. But as you can see in this slide, the CCS-U play really a significant role. So more than half of this solution is really proposed by the CCS-U. Go to the next slide, please. And so what can we do in our cement plant? You know that cement plant is a very complex industry. It's really a heavy industry. We are dealing with quite a lot of material. A plant may produce more than 1 million tons of cement, but of course you need to play with millions tons of raw material, of fuel. So this is not really an easy stuff to do, to really change quite a lot our process, also because the CO2 is a relevant part of the emission we have. You have to think that for every ton of clinker we are emitting more or less 1 ton of CO2. So there are several technologies which are already used at pilot scale or even at semi-industrial scale in cement plant. So post-combustion, oxy-fuel, but even also innovative solution like the calcium looping. So please go to the next slide. So you probably know the post-combustion solvent system are system based on a solvent that is able to dissolve CO2 and to remove the CO2. This is a solution which is already on the market, so we could already buy one of these technical solutions and install in our plant. The advantage of post-combustion capture by solvents is that we don't have to change our process, so we can keep the cement plant as it is and basically add this post-combustion solution at the end of the process and operate it. This is of course easy to do, but it has several disadvantages. The cost, the use of chemical solvents, which we are not really a chemical company, we are not used to use solvents, so it can be interesting for some plants where maybe we have low energy cost, but of course this is the technology which is on the market at the moment. An alternative solution is to go to the so-called oxy-fuel combustion. So we are burning in our kiln fuel with using air, and so we are injecting, of course, in our kiln also quite a lot of nitrogen. So the CO2 that we get out of our emission is diluted with nitrogen, and one of the possible solutions to increase the CO2 amount is to use pure oxygen. So to replace the air with pure oxygen, and in that case we may be able to strongly increase the concentration of the CO2. This is a technology that will be tested in the next year. There are some projects. There is a big project in Germany with the aim to install really an oxy-fuel plant and to see and to evaluate the issue related to the quality of cement, and also to see how effective could be this technology. Of course, this is a very high cost solution. There is a need also to modify the plant, especially due to the fact that usually the cement plant have a negative pressure, because we need to avoid that dust is coming out of the depression is also sucking fresh air, and so this situation could probably reduce the effectiveness of using pure oxygen in our. But this is a solution that will be tested in the next year. So, and I think we will have soon some results coming from industrial operation. Another very interesting solution is the so-called calcium looping. So there are the calcium looping is a way to capture CO2 by using calcium oxide. Calcium oxide are able to react with CO2 and forming calcium carbonate at 650 degrees. And if you are able to calcine the calcium carbonate in oxygen in another reactor, then you will be able to obtain free calcium oxide that could be used again to capture CO2. So this is the basic concept. This is basically a looping of calcium. The calcium is used to react with CO2 and then is calcined in an oxygen environment, in an oxygen reactor. The calcium looping already has been tested also in cement plant as a tail end solution. So as a solution that is using basically the CO2 emitted by the cement plant. So the cement plant again remain unchanged. We use the same schema of the plant, and then we will add the carbonator and the calciner at the end of the plant. But what, please go to the next slide. What is the more recent development of this solution is integrate calcium looping. So with the idea to combine the calcination that is happening during the production of clinker at the cement plant with the calcination needed for producing the calcium oxide to be used in the calcium loop. So the idea behind the clinker project is exactly to test at the cement plant this solution. So to try to integrate the calcium looping in the production of the clinker, try to optimize the heat, so to use the heat of the cement plant for operating the carbonation. The carbonation happens at 650 degrees. And also to use the calcium oxide, which is used for the production of clinker. In our plant, we use calcium oxide, which is called raw meal. So we decarbonize the limestone and we use it as a raw meal for the clinker production. And the idea here is to use the same raw meal also for producing calcium oxide to be used in the capture process. Please go to the next slide. You can see the consortium of the project. You can see also the location of the plant and a picture of the Vernasca plant in Italy, not far from Piacenza. Next slide, please. So let's go now a little bit more in detail regarding the process that will be tested, and I try to give to explain you how it will work. So you have the existing preheating tower in a cement plant. So you can see here the kiln and the preheater tower. Basically, we are using raw meal, calcium carbonate, that together with clay will react in the kiln in order to form the clinker. So basically a combination of calcium silicate. On the right, you can see the configuration with the integrated calcium looping plant. So basically, the CO2 emitted by the kiln will go in the carbonator, and in the carbonator will meet calcium oxide that will be producing the calciner, so in the orange one. The calciner will be operated with oxygen. So the calciner calciner will be pure, the emission of the calciner will be pure on CO2, because we will not use any more fresh air here, but only pure oxygen. The calcium oxide produced in the calciner will be able to capture the CO2 emitted by the kiln, okay? And so it means that out of the carbonator we will have no CO2, because the CO2 will be completely removed by the calcium oxide, and the calcium oxide will form calcium carbonate and will go again in the loop. Of course, this loop doesn't work for the eternity, so after 5-6 cycles, the calcium oxide is not anymore able to capture CO2 at an efficient way, but this is not a big problem if we are integrated in at the cement plant, because we can use this calcium oxide as a component of the kiln. Next slide, please. So the aim of the project is really to install a pilot plant working with this technology. You can see here the picture of the cement plant. You can see the drawing also of the pilot plant on the preheater tower of Vernasca. So and the picture of the preheater tower, in order to give you an idea of the dimension existing there. Please go to the next slide. So we start the project in the 2017. There has been a lot of work dealing with the engineering, the erection. So was very successful, I have to say, because we were ready in October last year with the erection of the plant, and we started our commissioning with the cold test, with the warm test. So we expect to do the first important trial in the next few months. Go to the next slide, please. You can see, okay, some picture of the erection. Next. You can see the next slide. There are some more pictures. You can see here the picture of the cement plant and the cement plant with the pilot plant. The pilot plant is capturing 1% of the flue gas emitted in Vernasca. So it's relatively small amount in percentage, but is really a big amount in terms of volume of CO2. Next. Go to the next picture or slide. Okay, yeah, okay, we were able also to do an opening event at the beginning of October, just to open officially the operation of the pilot plant, and hopefully we will have the first results of the experimental campaign in the next few months. Next slide. You can follow also our project going to the website, so there are a lot of the activity, of course, will be published in the social network, but also in our website. Please go to the next slide. Okay, so that was just an overview of the project. Thank you very much. I am available for question.
Thank you very much, Fulvio. So we will now move to the question and answer part of this. So I also have Peter. I also have Peter on the line. So hopefully you will be able to hear the answers. So you can see that I've published some of the questions and answers. So I thought I would start with one of the Porthouse project. There was a question clarifying the timescale for the Porthouse project. So Peter, would you like to clarify on construction and storage and the timescale for this?
Yes, I will. Thank you very much. I hope everyone can hear me over your loudspeaker. But the project construction will start in January 2022, so from now 1 year, and then will be finalized at the end of 2023. And it includes, as well as the onshore piping, the compressor station, also as the turnaround of the platform and injection fields. And what should be added to that is that the detail engineering and material selection and contracting will all be done before FID in January 2022.
Thank you very much, Peter. Maybe a question for any of the presenters. So somebody asked, is the storage site in large saline aquifers, is that the long-term solution? So we have examples from saline aquifers and oil and gas fields today. And I think it's quite an interesting question to see which will be developed. So we know that there's more uncertainty for saline aquifers, but they also have a much larger potential capacity. And as we know from the Porthouse project, it can be challenging to use pre-existing oil and gas fields. In the Porthouse project, you have quite a unique challenge because the pressure is so low. So would you like to comment on this, Peter?
Yes, I will. Yes, it is a difficulty to start up production in a gas field due to the Joule-Thomson effect and the low pressure in the depleted gas fields. Nevertheless, Porthouse gas field is the first gas field we can inject in. It's only 35 megatons big, but we have over 1,000 megatons storage capacity on the North Sea left, which could in future be connected as well. And another question is why we should store in one field and not in multiple. Well, as the same answer as Per Sandberg gave, I think we should store CO2 in as many storages as we can find.
This is very true. We do need to undertake an awful lot of CO2 storage. It's quite startling when you look, for example, at the GCCSI report that says how much we need to ramp up our CO2 storage to even have a hope of meeting the targets. So I have a question for Fulvio now. So asking about the clinker project, do you think that this could be the first step for storing more CO2 from industrial emissions like cement? Is this a good way forward?
But, yes, I mean, as I already said, there are already some technology for capture available, and I think that is the difficulties we have now is really to find the opportunity for store CO2. So, for example, this plant where we are testing the calcium looping is, let's say, in the middle of North Italy, quite far away from opportunity to store CO2. Or, I mean, there will be some opportunity to store CO2 not far from this plant, but the population is definitely not interested to do. So we have to deal also with social aspects. So yeah, probably this is our first approach, and we will see. Probably yes. I think such a kind of project, so the support of such kind of project, also economical support, is really beneficial for our research to show that we can do that this is possible, and so also our community can be involved. So I didn't mention, but an important part of the clinker project is also related to social aspect. So to involve the local people, school, citizen in the development of such a project and such a concept. Unfortunately, cement industry are still seen by the population as a big polluting industry. And so when we start in continental Europe and Germany, and so when we start to say that we are going to store our CO2 somewhere, so it's not easy to approach in the right way this project. I know that in Scandinavia, in Norway, they may be seen differently. So, but it's depend on the region.
Okay, thank you very much for this answer. There are a couple more questions that I've published in the Q&A session, and I'd like to ask the presenters if they would be happy to connect to answer those in the chat, because I'd like to move on to the last presentation from Marie Gastine on the ENOS project. So Marie, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Carrie. So waiting for the presentation to be put online. I'm Marie Gastine, I'm from BRGM, and I was coordinating the ENOS project. ENOS stands for Enabling Onshore Storage in Europe. And the main point was to try and accelerate storage onshore. And I'll try to summarize in a very short presentation. I'm given 10 minutes, highlights from the results of the project. In the project, we had 30 partners from all over Europe. You will get a good description of the partners on the website. I'm not going to expand on that now. Next slide, please. So the ENOS project was a European project funded by H2020, and the objective of the project was to enable CO2 storage onshore. And this was by developing and field testing key technologies adapted to onshore applications. We wanted to demonstrate through practical experience that injection operations can be run safely and efficiently onshore, ensure matched storage capacities and that they are affordable to verify, demonstrate our capacity to detect, manage potential leakage risks, and integrate CO2 storage into the local economy activities so that it will help the deployment of CCS. There was a strong effort also in engaging the local population in storage research and storage projects. Without this engagement, we won't be able to develop CO2 storage onshore. And we also worked a lot on trying to create a favorable environment for onshore storage across Europe, and this by supporting knowledge sharing to maximize the benefits of all site demonstrations worldwide, and support preparation of new pilot projects and promote CCS through training and education. Next slide, please. So in ENOS, we relied on several sites to do the work. There were 2 sites where we should have done CO2 injection in shallow environment to test our capacity to detect and understand leakage. One was in the UK, GeoEnergy testbed, and the other one in Italy, Sottacarbo fault lab. One into an aquifer and one into a fault context. And there was also planned CO2 injection in Hontomen in the pilot site in a gypsaline carbonate. Unfortunately, the plans in Spain for Hontomen have changed, and due to a policy change, there was no more CO2 injection planned in Spain. As a consequence, the ENOS project had to be interrupted by the Commission, and we couldn't fulfill completely our program. So we didn't get the opportunity to also do the CO2 release in the 2 sites in the UK and Italy. However, during the project, we also managed to do quite a lot, and I will present you the main results. So there are 2 other sites also on which we worked, and that are Q16 Maas in the Netherlands, really next to Porthouse project, where in ENOS we studied the possibility to use a very small field to do CO2 buffering and reproduce part of the stored CO2 for greenhouse horticulture. And there was also a case study on a site in the Czech Republic. It's an abandoned oil field, and we studied the possibility to do EOR and CO2 storage there. Next slide, please. So the main results of the project on the topic of try to link storage project with the local economy are, first we worked on buffer storage, like I said, trying to use a long-term storage site to also be able to back produce part of the CO2 that is stored so that it can be used by the local economy. In the case we studied in the Netherlands, there are very many greenhouses growing vegetables for eating, and they use some CO2 to inject into the atmosphere of the greenhouses so that the plants grow a bit quicker. So there is actually need for CO2, and it is not completely filled by the actual nowadays CO2 producers. So what was performed in the ENOS project was reservoir modeling, injection and pack production, so an assessment of the gas composition that was back produced, an estimation also of what surface installation would be needed, if the gas stream needs to be treated or not, in what condition. Also an assessment on the monitoring system that would be necessary for such an installation, and so that we can ensure on one side CO2 production, but also permanent storage of the CO2 that is not back produced, and also the regulation implications of such a project. And this whole work was done hand in hand with a consortium of industrials producing CO2 and also from the greenhouse the greenhouse owners that are buying the CO2. And as a concept and results of the study, the industry stakeholders deemed that it's potentially economically viable. So, however, Q16 mass is not envisaged anymore to do CO2 storage, but still the concept stays and will potentially be used later on. Next slide. So the second case study we studied to embed storage in local economy is the development of EOR. This is not new, but try to optimize EOR with CO2 storage in mind. And on the case study of LBR1 in Czech Republic, the modeling that has been done assessed that it's possible for the oil field in the end to reach carbon neutrality, meaning that more CO2, or at least as much or more CO2, can be stored in the storage than it has been produced through producing oil. So a result also is a modeling basis is ready to be used on other sites. We assessed also the transboundary effects of the storage sites. LBR1 is really next to the border between the Czech Republic and the Slovak Republic. Slovakia, sorry, not Slovak Republic. And so it was a good opportunity to study what were the implications of that. There was also some regulating issues that were studied with matter of doing enhanced oil or gas recovery and CO2 storage at the same time, while it's not very easy on a legal term. And there was also a regional roadmap in the Vienna Basin that was built with the aim of upscaling the identified synergy of CO2 storage with CO2 EOR. There are quite a lot of oil and gas fields in the Vienna Basin, so there are a lot of opportunities to do there, to move from EOR to CO2 storage. To first do EOR and then CO2 storage. Next slide, please. So we also had a part of the work that looked at site characterization, and we had 3 main activities. One was trying to assess uncertainty that are related with capacity estimates. When we do capacity estimates at the very beginning of a project, we have a lot of uncertainty. And there was a model developed to assess the uncertainties and propagate them. And they were tested on case studies. You've got a report available on the website. A smart characterization tool has been also developed to have de-risk early site characterization. The tool is there to optimize the number of wells to be drilled or lines, seismic lines to be shot based on the already given knowledge and the best value for money you can get. And also a low-cost rig concept has been developed, rigs that would be adapted to CO2 storage needs, but at the same time have a cheaper well in the end. So next slide, please. It looks stuck.
I think keep talking, Marie. The slides will catch up with you if that's possible.
Yeah. I just need to take my next slide because I don't know it by heart. We also worked on understanding, detect, and manage potential leakage risk. Like I said, unfortunately, we couldn't do the whole range of activities we planned to do. There was a lot of effort put into preparing the site for the release of CO2 in the shallow environment, so the GeoNet test bed and the Soda Carbo fault lamp. There has been a lot of site characterizations, geological models, and fault characterization, etc. The drillings of the different injection and observation wells, and also the start of baseline acquisition. In the meantime, a wide range of monitoring tools for shallow environment have been progressed. Tools to effectively locate CO2 leakage, to try and quantify CO2, and many of them have been deployed, like I say, for pre-injection baseline data. There was also an assessment of the leakage risk represented by legacy wells at an onshore site and how to deal with them. As a result, the GeoEnergy test bed in the UK is ready for injection, and shallow CO2 injection will take place in April. Unfortunately, outside of the ENOS project, some national funding from the UK will be used to be able to do what was planned. And in the SFL and Soda Carbo fault lab in Sardinia, unfortunately, site development has been interrupted by COVID, but will resume in 2021. And the injection well will be drilled, and they will inject CO2 and do what we hope to do in ENOS. Next slide. So the work with the local community is very important. It's a key element, and we cannot do without it if we want to implement CO2 storage. We adopted in the project an interactive approach to understand the concern of citizens and the potential benefits of the technology at local level. So 4 country teams have worked together to develop a participatory research framework. And in 2 countries, the work was completely finalized. It was in the UK and the Netherlands. There have been many interactions between a group of citizens that has been organized with different researchers. And from this resulted different ways to develop a collaborative relationship, and also some societal requirements to be taken into account for CO2 storage implementation. Next slide, please. You will find in the next slide the links to main reports of this work. this will be available through CO2GeoNet after the webinar. And it's very interesting what took place in those two groups. Work was quite different, but in the Netherlands, a strong interaction was developed with the Porthouse project and the policy makers in the governments, so that social consent could be taken into account early enough in the project. So next slide more, even if the next one, please, Julia. So we also did work to try and pave the way for future projects. There was work done on identification of potential storage project opportunities across Europe and identification of key points that would ensure success. Recommendations from the regional roadmap in the Villeneuve Basin on how to ensure that as many projects can be done as possible. We try to enhance knowledge transfer and linking research teams worldwide. We launched some twinnings between operational sites. There was the launch of the Shadow Migration Network. There are many sites in the world where research teams plan to try and simulate leakage and see what happens and how good we are at predicting and measuring it. And so it's very interesting that all those sites can get together and share the experience. And we also had a series of webinars that are now available on the website. We had also work on training and education for young scientists and engineers. We had several sessions of the spring school with intensive one-week training on CO2 storage, and also the launch of an international master course on CO2 storage, with the first session taking place right in the middle of COVID, but they managed to complete it. And the next session is planned for next year. It was decided to wait for COVID interferences to lower down before trying a new session. And I think that's the last slide. Yes. Thank you for attention. If you have any question, and please visit our website where you will find all the public deliverables in the highlights section.
Thank you very much for this excellent presentation, Marie. It's excellent to see both presentations that were in this last session, and I thank you both for these presentations. So I have a quick question for Marie. So we saw a lot of commercial projects developing in CCS, and I wondered, what do you see as the role for researchers as CCS becomes more commercial?
Oh, well, I would say first is that the commercial side to tell us what are their main needs. But from what I understand is one is lowering costs of the monitoring technology would be something important. And also how to deal with the long-term commitments and how to prove a storage site is safe on the long term. But then it's through the experience they will acquire at this site that they will be able to define what the next priority should be for next research.
Thank you very much, Marie. And I think we've answered most of the questions in the chat session, so I hope that everybody has enjoyed the webinar. And I'd like to thank all of our presenters for their excellent talks today. And I believe we are expecting a few words from Roman, the chair of the CO2GeoNet Executive Committee, to close the webinar. Roman, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Gary. It has been a fantastic meeting indeed. We struggled a little bit with the technical issues, as often unfortunately happens. And I think that represents basically that the year has been fairly challenging, and I'm still pretty happy that we see so many activities going forward, despite the lockdown and all that issues. For me personally, it was very, very interesting to hear representatives of the Commission, of the industry, and of the research organizations in one webinar, such a short space of time, basically speaking essentially in the same tone. And it's, I think, represents important it is to have both the governmental support and the support from R&D community and involvement of the industry to move this activity forward. It's fantastic to finally see the project starting, and it's very inspirational. It's not only us scientists and researchers and engineers talking about how important it is. It's very good that the industry is taking this flag and bringing this forward to really large scale projects. I was also expected to say a few words about the future perspective, and I think they're quite bright. Maybe I'm a little bit optimistic, but I want to be that way. The winter webinar that we have now is, in a sense, maybe not replacing, but at least partially compensating for the lack of the open forum that we at the CO2GeoNet has been organizing for 14 continuous years before this unexpected thing had happened, and we planned it as the big 15th year non-stop event, despite all of the all of these ups and downs that CCS industry have seen, and here you go. But I'm really still hopeful that we should be able to meet face to face in 2021. If not, we still have seen that the events like this, although organized online, receive a lot of interest. So stay tuned with us, and we will definitely arrange more knowledge and information exchange in 2021, one way or another, hopefully in Venice. If not, then online. Thank you very much for participation. The presentations will be available on our website, so you're very welcome to come back and check up on it. Sign up for CO2GeoNet newsletter. We try to keep everybody updated, and hopefully see you face to face very soon. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Roman. And here we will close the webinar. Thank you very much to our speakers, and thank you to all the attendees. Stay safe in these strange times. Goodbye.
Goodbye.